Like many revolutions, the digital revolution was one of unfulfilled promise. As consumer camcorders hit the market in the early 90s, there was a new chance for directors to shake off the shackles of the industry's expectations. Making a film was easier than ever. Manifestos were written, movements emerged. But 30 years later, movie making is still controlled by a handful of major companies on a costly scale. And there is generally an absence of insurgent filmmakers using the latest affordable technology to breathe life into this arguably still young medium. But what are our case studies here? We will touch on this morning, whenever you're listening to this.
This evening.
Thomas Vinterberg's FESTEN and Harmony Korine's JULIEN Donkey Boy, two traumatic family dramas with a fuzzy home movie feel, both lensed by DV DOP du jour, Anthony Dodd Mantle. More on that later. We'll be looking at the Japanese response, seeing how Visitor Cube by Takashi Miike.
Miike.
Takashi Miike.
I think it's Miike.
And
I think it's Miike. I don't know.
It's the Miike.
I've always heard Miike.
Miike.
Doesn't matter.
And also talking about Hideaki Anno's Love and Pop, how they both stuck the camcorder up and under every skirt and sidewalk to bring perversion into grainy focus. We'll touch on the lively mumblecore chamber piece Yeast by Mary Bronstein, the gimmicky Hollywood parallel play Timecode by Mike Figgis, and Joanna Hogg's high-definition holiday debut Unrelated. We'll also look at how two auteurs associated with celluloid were drawn to the practical advantages of digital, both the crushed blacks of Pedro Costa's Colossal Youth and the blown-out whites of David Lynch's Inland Empire. Both show the creative spirit newly constrained and yet newly liberated. Joining us to discuss this vital and important topic is Daniel Neofetou, friend of the show, regular appearer.
Number
on the
nine.
show.
Number 9.
Revolution number 9, talking about the digital revolution. Now, Daniel, you I don't want to say invited yourself on, but you asserted.
Did literally.
I certainly invited myself
You
on,
asserted
yeah.
a
100%
need
did.
for your presence on this discussion of DV because you love DV.
I like DV. I do love DV, yeah.
Some of your favourite films are made on DV.
Some of my favourite films are made on DV, some of which we're going to talk about tonight. I had a bit of a revelation that I love DV when watching a film which we're not going to discuss tonight because neither of you have seen it. Ivan's Ecstasy.
We never quite made
Ivan's
it to
Ecstasy.
XTC.
Yeah. Ivan's
It's like
Ecstasy.
early noughties, so things have to be pronounced.
Yeah. So
XTC.
I was watching this on the recommendation of two pals about 2 years ago, and I realised it was like an involuntary realisation, a kind of a thought which is felt before it is conceived of how formative and important the DV aesthetic had been to my exploration of cinema. And I thought about it more lately, and I realized that maybe 4 of the films, but certainly 3 of the films we're discussing today, I saw when I was 18 in 2007. Right. I saw Inland Empire at the movies, I saw JULIEN Donkey Boy, and I saw Visitor Q, and I think I also saw the Dogme films then as well. I think I saw FESTEN and The Idiots then.
And at the time you were also...
But is The Idiots on DVD? Yeah, it is, of course, The Idiots Dogme film.
Or VHS on camcorder, yeah. But you were, and at this time you were also making stuff on camcorders.
Yeah, a lot of your early shit I've seen.
A few years later I started. But I did actually realise when I was watching JULIEN Donkey Boy the other day how much of my stuff from that time was influenced by that film. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an important element of context here, which is that mini DV was introduced as a format of filmmaking in around 1995. This is a technology which was supposed to disrupt and reformat filmmaking. So everyone's familiar with the camcorder. Many people listening to this podcast probably have interacted with a camcorder in their youth in some way or shape or form. A palm-sized...
Hopefully it was a pleasant experience.
A palm-sized portable camera. The Mini DV was not that. It was a professional or semi-professional camera which had...
Often used for documentary.
Often used for documentary or local regional news. It is an over-the-shoulder number, so it's not necessarily a... We'll talk a lot about the portability and maneuverability of DV tonight, probably, but it is still a piece of equipment. It's a heavy piece of equipment. It was expensive then. It's expensive now in a lot of ways.
But
it was a way of bridging.
But by the time of because mini DV tapes used.
DV was a format, but there was a camera.
The camera they used for Dogme.
Yeah,
was I don't know if it's the same because like.
Well, this is
the FESTEN camera is tiny. The FESTEN camera is a really small consumer
this is where we
camcorder.
enter a lot of ambiguity because there is a problem when we talk about DV, mini DV. There are mini DV cine cameras which were utilized, say, by Lynch in Inland Empire.
He uses a more bulky thing.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Anno and you look at Love and Pop, he used a large camera. He used a very large camera that required a lot of like external lighting. There's a certain mythology surrounding DV being this hyper-portable camcorder-esque camera. Often it was not. Often it did require a large crew. It did require a large cinematic crew.
Still nowhere near the crew you need for an Alexa.
No,
now.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So there is a certain mythology around the DV as this hyper-portable, silky, maneuverable camera. It wasn't necessarily that. And I think that's one of the interesting things about it. And it doesn't necessarily, when you look at films that were produced under the DV format, they tend to blur a bit. So you get films that were definitely produced using a cine DV format. You get films that were produced using camcorder and claim they were shot with DV. Stom Sogo is one of those. Like, it's very ambiguous whether he's shot with camcorder or DV, and it's like it would be unusual to think he shot with DV for his method of filmmaking.
But I mean, later camcorders in like the mid 2000s used mini DV tapes.
Yeah.
So it's the same medium.
We're looking at a 15-year period between 1995 and 2010 when they had the heyday, preceding the point where DSLR came in. Everyone's like, thank fuck. Oh, okay, finally, a camera-shaped camera that you can shoot really high-quality HDR film on. But there was a period where you could shoot digital film onto a tape, and it didn't require any of the light leaks and interesting shit that we learned from the avant-garde, the American avant-garde with film, like, you know, your brackages or whatever, where the experiment with the format or the recording format was like the basis of avant-garde filmmaking.
But there are lots of key like textural differences with TV. So they use very small sensors, which means that the depth of field is not it's very hard to achieve a shallow depth of field. So you often get everything basically in focus.
Flat plane.
So that kind of actually encourages more depth in a sort of Wellesian way. You're able to record longer takes. You're able to record for longer. So in terms of the practicality of a shoot, you're
not changing reels.
You're not changing reels.
Yeah.
Not like this recent Succession episode where they did this insane thing where they left loads of reels around the set so they could change it.
Because they use film for some bizarre reason.
Aesthetic reason. Or sort of status reason.
Status reason, not aesthetic reason.
Exactly.
It looks like it's shot digital.
But so, and there are these things, and then the kind of lenses that are sort of fixed to
a bridge lens almost.
to DV cameras. There are certain quirks. I mean, Joanna Hogg said with regards to Unrelated that she chose to shoot lots of still shots because there was a kind of compression thing. Yeah,
you get the
where if you move the camera very fast,
it creates a blur.
You get the blur.
Blur.
But then there were other directors who embraced these weird artifacts.
Can I ask Daniel a question at this point, which is like, I think DV necessarily implies a roughness, a sort of MTV aesthetic. But what would you say is the most, I suppose, cinematically beautiful DV film? Because there were films that reached a kind of beyond.
I think Julien Donkey Boy is the most cinematically beautiful DV film.
Why? Unpack that. Let's talk about Julien Donkey, but let's talk about Harmony Korine.
I think as Julien Donkey Boy is the most unashamedly DV film.
Right.
Like it couldn't be made on any other medium at all. There's no way it could be made on any other medium.
More so than FESTEN.
I agree with that.
I think more so than FESTEN, because FESTEN doesn't have shots where it actually luxuriates in the texture of the digital video.
It does, but
maybe it does, but
Julien Donkey Boy does more. Probably.
Yeah, because it's also plotless, right? It's plotless.
Yeah, Julien Donkey Boy is an ethnographic film about Midwest America.
FESTEN's not. I mean. Well, it's not. It's set in Queens, so it's not.
I mean, where the fuck? I don't care.
It's not. It's not completely plotless. Ethnographic is probably true. It sort of drifts between these very powerful fragments.
But it's plotless in the same way that Gummo's plotless.
Julien Donkey Boy has interstitial.
It has a diegesis. It doesn't have a plot.
Yeah, it has interstitial fragments where Harmony Korine says, "What textural, lyrical moments going to extract purely formally from the camera. So you'll get these moments that are ice skating, or it'll be Julien walking through a forest, and it will use the kind of like the blur effect of moving a camera very quickly, and it will explore the kind of textural quality of the film.
I mean, the ice skating scene is incredible, right?
Insane.
I mean, it's like it's like the most meek, I think the most Mikas-esque thing I've ever seen in a non-Mikas.
Yeah, because
like in a more like
Mikas on Bolex
projects.
Yeah,
Mikas on Bolex. Because one of the things about Mikas is that you get this. You're only capturing so many frames per second, so you get this juddery jumping.
I mean, ironically, when Mikas used DV, he used it really boringly. Maybe because he got old.
So interesting. He's so uninteresting as a DV.
It's because he got old, maybe, and he was just bored. But he uses DV like a documentary.
I think I don't want to be harsh about Mikas here, but I think Mikas. I mean, Mikas's films look totally gorgeous, but I think sometimes his desire to document is less driven by something which gives us great pleasure as viewers, which is the richness of the color on film.
But it clearly was in Walden. But Walden has these like the whole shaky cam, the whole weird. It has the weird close up. It has the intuitive textual close-ups.
But I think the driving force is like the insane autism of wanting to document everything.
No, I agree with Daniel. I agree. He did have a textural, formal appreciation for beauty with those early films like Walden. And I think there was
actually in that film that we saw, the film that we saw in Wroclaw, where he's re-photographing the 1940s.
The man who
did
saw
autobiography
something.
of a man who saw the thing. There are two films that has very similar titles.
So no, I think that there is a Mikas where. Mikas transition to DV or camcorder later in his life, and Daniel's right. They lose a certain juddery, impressionistic imprecision that he had in his earlier films, and he was there. There are many home movies you can watch with Bolex where people film things relatively normally. He was moving the camera in a way that introduced a judderiness and a kind of blur.
It's true, and he dwells on things, and the use of light.
The use of light is amazing.
And it's incredible. He was aware that he was doing that. And I think when it came to DV was too perfect for him because it revealed too much. It revealed the pores.
But DV is really pale. If you don't work with it afterwards. DV, whereas like film without doing anything to it, if you just get it back from the lab, has all it's graded, or it has all this gorgeous color in it.
Yeah.
Whereas
richness of palette.
DV in general, especially old camcorders, they were quite pale, quite flat. They didn't have that depth. But it's a question of whether or not you'd want to kind of try and bring that in, or whether or not you'd want to control.
But that's how Korine works, right?
Yeah. But Inland Empire, for instance, it's shot on DV, but the lighting is extremely controlled
because he has a film setup. Like I think with Lynch, with that thing, the difference is with Lynch
and with
making
Colossal Youth as well. Actually,
Colossal Youth and maybe Inland Empire, the two most cinematic films shot on, and maybe then FESTEN in a different way after them, the most cinematically shot. And I think with Inland Empire, because it is a film fundamentally about a film being made, it inhabits the space of the metafictional space of filmmaking. And he also used the DV in a way where he could explore depth.
But it's also unashamedly
and
DV
darkness,
as well. It's not trying to be.
It's not trying to be film.
At all.
No.
In a way that when he's shooting Twin Peaks: The Return, it does have a kind of vibe of. It seems like it wants to be 35mm.
Because he's using
sort of. It's actually it's shot on the Ari Amira, which is a weird. This is nerd talk, but like it's not the Alexa that everyone. He refused to use the Alexa. He wanted to use like a documentary version of this cinema camera, which is like very rare. Very few people use that. Most documentarians would use as kind of a cheaper camera, and all filmmakers seem to use the Alexa. But I think that Colossal Youth and Inland Empire are fairly late DV films. I mean, they come out in 2006 or 7, way after Dogma, way after a lot of people have kind of made their mark on.
FESTEN being 98, I think, or 99, or
97, I think.
97, a little bit earlier.
Fact check that, but I mean, FESTEN is the most sort of obvious chaotic form equals content, like extremely.
Well, FESTEN opens
dynamic.
with a fisheye lens shot of a man walking down a road. It's very much like you were in the world of an immediate physical corporeal presence of filmmaking, and most of FESTEN unfolds in a way that is immediately corporeal. And I think that's one thing DV does really well, is it gives you a sense of a body amongst bodies. It inserts the POV very much amongst it. But there's one thing FESTEN does really well, Vinterberg does really well, which is there's a scene, a ghost scene. There's a scene in a room, and it uses depth and the imprecision of the DV cam to pick up darkness and shadows really well. It's a very haunting scene, and it's something that
scene's amazing,
incredible, right? And it's something that Lynch will use really well later in Inland Empire when you get a lot of the very dark scenes and these hallucinogenic. As the film becomes more hallucinogenic, you get more scenes where the imprecision of the darkness is used in a way that's really interesting. And it's something actually Pedro Costa will use in Colossal Youth, which is these dark, smeary interior scenes in Fontenhas in Lisbon, where they are very formally, beautifully composed. And there's a particularly, I think the scene that stands out for me is a scene in the museum where you get the character, what's his name?
Ventura.
Oh, the main guy.
Yeah, the main guy. You get Ventura sitting in a museum.
He's in a bunch of them.
Yeah.
He's in all of them, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He's in Horse Money.
Ones, yeah.
He's in
yeah, Ventura's room. So there's a scene where he's sitting on a sofa.
He's not in the first one, is he? Is he on the first? No,
is he in
he is in the first one. Yeah, he is.
There's also an interesting interview with Pedro Costa where he says actually that guy was around all the time and he found him very comforting to have him around. But there's a scene when he's in this museum with a lot of sort of like, I guess, mid Renaissance paintings, but he's on a sofa and the sofa is lit really precisely with a spotlight, and a clock is lit in the distance with one, and it's this beautiful moment of it looks almost like artist film in a way, but it is cinema narrative film, and I felt like it's a moment of Pedro Costa kind of being like, you know, how can I use DV cam to create Renaissance or Rococo style depth with bodies, but in a really abject way, because these films are very abject. Like I find
Colossal Youth really hard to talk about because I think it.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's such an incredible film. I still don't really know why. Like, I think it's one of the it's one of the best films ever made. Well, it's in my top 40.
Yeah.
But
what would you say is so well made about it?
I don't know. It's just
it's
a really
the compositions are stunning.
A conceptual experience though.
Yeah.
But you can enumerate all these reasons why it's great. Obviously, like compositionally, it's incredible, and it has a unrelenting like.
It's like a Beckett play.
Pace. Yeah, exactly. You say, but it's something else about it, and it's something about the autonomy of the image. It's so, but it's both a very, very sensitive portrayal of this,
of objection,
this lumpen proletariat community. It doesn't objectify them at all, in a way, and also, funnily enough, in a way that I feel like Julien Donkey Boy also manages to do, right? So, because Korine has definitely cast these people because they're like crazy freaks, but it's so sensitive. It's still really sensitive to them.
It's I think even having someone like a character like Werner Herzog, involved in it as the father, it kind of establishes yes, these people are freaks, but there's a beauty and a lyricism to their
but they're all actors, aren't they? Like Ewan Bremner playing the main.
But I didn't mean so much the main cast. I meant like the
surrounding cast.
The surrounding cast.
One thing that Harmony Korine,
I don't feel like they're exploited in any way.
Because one thing Harmony Korine does with that film is he has
people do try and bring discourse to Korine, early Korine.
But I do feel with trash humpers, I'm always a little bit uncomfortable with trash humpers because I feel like it does.
I'm uncomfortable with it just being not that good.
Yeah, I think it's a great film.
Like it. I don't.
But I think it has got that kind of element of like laughing at Hicks.
I think Julien Donkey Boy has an amazing. So has these, like I said earlier, has these amazing interstitial textural moments. But it also has a lot of these ethnographic moments where it shoots in a sort of evangelical.
It's also so funny with this. I don't want a loser. I don't want a loser for
a
the sun.
Loser does not shiver.
But I feel like
that was very shitty.
So I do feel like that's an aside anyway. I'm pointing about Julien Donkey Boy as an aside. But I feel like with Colossal Youth, I guess Colossal Youth. Yeah, I feel like it. Yeah, it has this like insane restraints. Obviously,
Yeah.
And it's unrelentingly inaccessible to anyone who doesn't give themselves over fully to it.
Yeah.
You have to be like, I'm watching this film. I'm going to sit and watch
It's
this film.
Pretty much
hard
true
to
of all
watch.
of his, at least all of his Fontanas films.
Yes,
Particularly of his
but
Fontanas films,
not so much of Vitalina Varela. Wherein Vitalina Varela is arduous for someone who's expecting to watch a narrative film. Yes, but it has a real sumptuous beauty, which I think translates to people who will be fans of MOR Art House, right?
I think,
a Ray Gaddis fan would enjoy it.
I think
they
with
might be offended by.
But I think that's partly the DV. I think the Colossal Youth.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I was getting to.
I think the DV is kind of like it's almost like a kind of a chiffon that slightly mediates you from this kind of starkness that's obviously kind of meant to be there in the fact that the shots are lit in a very deliberate way and composed in a very deliberate way. But the fact that you'll never really be able to see, the eyelashes, the details,
but you
in the way that you would in film and you would in HD.
There are moments with Pedro Costa where there will be particular scenes, and particularly one of the main motifs of Colossal Youth is this new housing block. So Fontanas has been demolished and a lot of people are being displaced into this new housing block. So this new housing block is very white. And one of the great things is the state's, I suppose, compliance with his demands. He's like, he goes to see a small flat and he's like, I actually have many children. And they say, how many children do you have? And he's like, they're not on your list. And he says, well, I have many. So this estate agent effectively, or this government estate agent, then finds him a place with 5 bedrooms, which is like the biggest place they have in the whole of Lisbon.
Before austerity.
Before austerity. And it's amazing. And he's not satisfied by this place. But the scene shot in that building, the DV suddenly reveals pockmarks and like individual hairs on his face, which you haven't been able to see before. Like
but that's what I mean. It suddenly reveals it, but oftentimes it's not visible.
Yeah, he's no more exposed to the observant eye than he is at this point, where he's at his most exposed because he's subjecting himself to the supplications of the state. Before that, we see him in these murky rooms where you can't really make out his face. There are many times in Colossal Youth where you're watching it, you go, you actually don't know what Ventura's face looks like, because you see him in different guises and he looks almost different each time you see him. Often because he's got this white bandage around his head. It's a extended analogy for the Carnation Revolution, whatever. So it kind of jumps back in time a little bit to the 70s. In theory, it does. But it has an amazing use of the imprecision of DV, which is something that Lynch kind of does with Inland Empire. Like, there are moments where he embraces the lack of depth or the flatness of depth to achieve horrific effects. Like, I mean that in a literal sense, like horror, like kind of unease or unheimlich kind of thing. But then there are other things like, Harmony Korine with Julien Donkey Boy, which is so like in your face. But then there's the Japanese, and we haven't talked about the Japanese films.
Let's
We haven't
talk
talked
about
about
the
Hideaki Anno.
Before we talk about Japanese, I want to say something about Inland Empire. I think an interesting way in which Inland Empire was determined by DV is not so much formal, but also content. Like a lot of the motifs in it, because obviously Lynch in all of his films, certainly Lost Highway, Inland Empire, and Mulholland Drive, has these signifiers which refer to nothing but themselves, but seem to be MacGuffins. Seem to be important.
Look out for the man in the red hat.
Yeah.
The red hair.
And in Inland Empire, it's one of the things is a red light bulb, right? A red light bulb recurs many times throughout the film. And the reason why it occurs many times throughout the film is because I think the first scene they shot before he knew he was going to turn it into a feature was the scene where Laura Dern encounters the guy with the red light bulb in his mouth, right? And apparently the actor turned up to shoot with a pair of funny glasses on. And Lynch was like, I don't like those funny glasses. They look stupid. Take them off. But the actor insisted that he needed a prop of some kind. So Lynch went into his drawer, into his studio, and got out 2 things. One of them was something like, a shard of broken glass. I can't remember what it was. But one of them was a red light bulb. And the actor was like, I don't know the actor's name, but he was like, yeah, I'll use the red light bulb, and put it in his mouth. and that became like a major motif throughout the film.
Mm.
But I feel like that could be possible. Of course, it could be physically possible with film, but the freedom for improvisation that it allowed Lynch resulted in this element to the film, which is like a central element of the film, and will like, you know, it's something.
But
that's
wait, how did
motif
DV allow for that that detail?
Because he was just shooting random stuff, like
Here and there.
He was. He says in an interview that like he began making Inland Empire just to make some digital shorts for his website.
Right, they weren't really
And
connected,
some
were
of them
they?
appear, don't they?
Yeah.
But they are all set up. I mean, there are lots of sets. He's improvising on those sets, but there are like, unlike some of like there are clearly like.
No, yeah, but that came later. That came later. That was when he turned it into a feature.
A post-facto
But, like, a lot of
narrative
that turned into a feature. But a lot of the scenes were just improvisatorily shot. Like it was just him, Laura Dern, and that other actor, as far as I know, on the set.
And he
at
shot
that point.
everything, the whole film.
He shot the whole film. Yeah.
Because there was a sense where it was an assemblage post facto that was built into a film, which lends to the sense of eeriness, I suppose. But so we've
very similar to Mulholland Drive, right?
Yeah.
Mulholland Drive was a TV pilot turned into a film.
Mulholland Drive feels like more of a complete film in a sense.
It does, because the first 2/3 were a pilot.
But I think what we haven't talked about obviously is the
Japanese films,
experiment with DV, which I think is plumbing a different like psychosexual and social kind of line, and I think a lot of that has to do with the idea of the DV as a format of surveillance.
Yes, exactly.
And exposure
and of like porn and
porn, literally porn. And I think
I guess.
You get films like
and self-examination,
self-examination. I mean, the films you looked at were Visitor Q and Love and Pop, and I think both of those films explore. I think particularly Love and Pop explores the idea of the DV as a method of surveillance. I think one formal strategy that comes out through Love and Pop by Hideaki Anno is the constant cutting and switching of the camera and its angle. So he's suddenly shooting someone's ankles, he's shooting overhead, he's shooting from the side, he's shooting from a bag, he's shooting through a window. It cuts at a really rapid pace.
It made me think of one of those. I remember when Breaking Bad was on, people would send around these horrific video essays where someone would be like, you know what the really great thing about Breaking Bad is that they shoot scenes from inside a washing machine. And then, and it's like, what's amazing about, but obviously that happens like, twice in an episode or one. Whereas like in Love and Pop, like every shot
3 seconds
is like in a microwave or like up someone's skirt or like on a little train going around
it's
the house.
Amazingly inventive. And there's a real sense with like a film like Love and Pop where he was really going, okay, this DV camera is as light as shit. I can put this anywhere. And a lot of the film is about him going, where can I put this camera?
Yeah, like if you're just chopping some vegetables and the camera would just be like right under the knife.
It'll be on the knife.
Yeah.
There are times where the camera's literally like moving in motion with somebody's body, and it does have a surveillance quality. There is a obvious through line with a film like Love and Pop.
It's inside a fan at one point, a fan that's going back and forth. Sorry,
it's insane. It's absolutely insane. It's such a masterclass in like what can you do with the camera in a way that is not really deferential to ideas of classical composition in any way. But there's something very beautiful about it. I think in the final third of that film, the final quarter of that film, it becomes something very sublime, where he uses POV, the camera, as a point of view to
like Peep Show.
Kind of like Peep Show, and to explore rape. And
I haven't seen Love.
You should watch it. The final half an hour is amazing.
By the way, listeners.
By the way,
FYI, that's why I'm not chiming in.
But he has a moment where he makes the camera the viewing camera coincident with the human eye, and it's through a moment of like this really like I hate to use this like contradiction in terms, but tender rape that is then explicated.
Horrible creepy guy though, surely.
Yeah, deeply creepy guy.
Come on,
but it's something
he's really grim.
It's
not as grim as the guy in Visitor Q, but we'll get.
Yeah, I think.
I think that transcends grimness, right?
It's off the Richter.
It's
Richt. Off the Richter.
Sorry, we've lost Owen.
Sorry, I'm back. So yeah, Visitor Q is an amazing film. It's Teorema, but it's past.
It's Teorema, yeah.
But
if Teorema involved
raping a dead corpse.
a dead corpse as
a living corpse.
Hey, no, and and his dick gets stuck in the corpse because of rigor mortis. and
But they have
vinegar. If you ever
Is that what they use?
if you're
Vinegar?
ever stuck in this
they use
situation,
vinegar. They use vinegar. Yeah.
No, because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
the interesting thing about
Just,
a film like Visitor Q is Visitor Q was created as a series of formal experiments by 6 filmmakers. It was one of the outcoming films of this group of 6 filmmakers, like Paris for 6.
really, I thought it was just made by one guy.
No, there
No,
was
it's one of
One
six
of six
films.
Oh, okay, right.
each of whom used mini DV. I think this
Are
is
they all called
probably
like Visitor P?
maybe. I think this is the most salvageable film of all of them, and it's a very
Wait, have you
interesting
seen
film.
the other 5?
I haven't, no.
Yeah.
But I suspect the others are like
Even worse.
porno films,
Even
basically.
more grim.
But there's something about it. There's something about Visitor Q where it uses the tawdriness of DV to explore certain ideas of like domestic life, private life, shame, and to make private life public, which is what.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's also an element of horror,
the
right?
protagonist, for context, like the protagonist is making a film about teenagers. He's a documentarian making films about teenagers.
Yeah.
And the first scene we see of him making a film about a teenager is him propositioning his sex worker daughter and then having sex with her.
Yeah.
Like, so from the off, like, you know that this film is just like completely transgressive, and there are no,
And she
there are no,
bullies him for coming too soon.
and then charges him more for coming too soon. So you know already that this film,
A fact
like
you remember,
any framework of ethical norms which you would usually go into a film with,
Thanks for
thrown out the
clarifying
window immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
Just saying, like Miike makes it very clear from the off.
Yeah. She doesn't always make clear with Audition, for instance.
Yeah, but she doesn't make clear for audition. Yeah,
The Japanese context explores these ideas of excessive shame, and I think something like Visitor Q, what it does is it takes an idea of alienation, which is something we saw with maybe Julian Donkey Boy. It's something we see with FESTEN. It's something we see with Lynch's Inland Empire. The DV format used to explore alienation, and it takes to a very kind of like, I suppose, clunky extreme. And you know, Visitor Q has a moment where the filmmaker father enlists a colleague to make a film with him about his son being bullied.
yeah.
And his main thing is like he thinks that his son being bullied by these boys, and they're kind of like, it's not just
Bullies
bullying.
who they subsequently murder with the implements they were using to cut up a corpse. Just by the way,
Corpse of his daughter who you killed.
But yeah, there's a
and raped.
moment of great catharsis. So yeah,
Got stuck inside.
he watches his
no, not
son.
his daughter. It's not his daughter.
No,
No, is that? But she says the thing about coming. Oh,
no.
What? No.
The daughter
Have you
doesn't
seen the
appear much in
film?
I did. I watched it just now.
I know, but he's like
It's
the
not
daughter's
obviously
fine at the
left an
end.
impression on you.
Because the whole film is that the Visitor Q brings them back together.
Oh, the daughter. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
He breaks through their libidinal kind of.
It's the same as Teorema,
blocks.
right?
Yeah.
But
There's a different sex worker who he
Yeah.
cuts up.
Yeah. So there's basically a moment where he watches his son being bullied and tries to enlist a colleague journalist to make a film with him. She dissents and says she's not into it, like, and he murders and rapes her. Fucking film.
Crazy.
But there is something about the film which leads to this ultimate release, and a lot of it is based around this
a
idea
lot of breast milk.
a lot of breast milk. There's a
Oh,
lot of
yeah,
squeezing.
she has
Very
a
sublime.
multi-stream, like a sprinkler or something.
Yeah, she has
Yeah.
Anyway.
So basically, what this film does very well is it explores ideas of surveillance, private being dragged into public, which is something that Love and Pop does as well. It says this is the private life dragged into the public.
It's also sort of a horror, right? I think there's something like not.
Yeah, they're supposed to be horrifying. It's
We're-
supposed to be disturbing films.
But
They're not
we're
supposed to be
studiously
normative.
avoiding talking about Blair Witch Project or Cloverfield or whatever these sorts
Well,
of.
I think Cloverfield's not DV. Was Blair Witch
Clover-
DV? Isn't Blair Witch
No,
VHS?
they're
Camcorder. Yeah.
Fine,
they're
And Cloverfield is like that was shot on.
Sure, but it's a film that invokes the
But Cloverfield's just shot on digital.
Right.
Digital.
It doesn't matter. We don't need to talk about it because we are literally not talking about it. But what I'm saying is that there are in Hollywood there are films which use the texture of camcorder to
in the found film genre.
To invoke horror, to bring you into a sense of authenticity.
Yeah.
Also, the
with
Paranormal
something-
Activity films. I
Exactly.
believe I haven't seen them. Yeah.
So I'm just saying there is a genre of horror film that uses camcorder or like
The camcorder was a
non-cinematic
a
material.
shortcut device
And there
to
is
achieve basically amateur authenticity,
A sense of reality, yeah, and
which is something that I think Lynch really, really understood really well about like a lot of the most horrifying scenes of something like Inland Empire or
his
tawdriness.
second most terrifying film, because his most terrifying film is, of
The
course,
Straight Story.
Yes. His most terrifying film is Fire Walk With Me.
Oh yeah,
Fire
that
Walk With Me is
fucking
terrifying.
horrific.
That's shot on film though. To be honest, so.
But
I'm
yeah,
saying, yeah, but
as I was saying, A Visit to Q has an element of this horror as well, but it has a few jump scares and it's Takashi Miike.
I don't think we're talking. I mean, we've kind of skirted around or talked around Pedro Costa. I think Pedro Costa is someone who took.
We've talked about him in quite depth.
We have, but I feel
more
like
than anyone else, I believe.
No, formally, I'm just going back to it because I feel like someone like Pedro Costa took DV to a place that feels unmatched and visually, texturally.
Well, I feel like Julian Donkey Boy and Costa both make films which could not be made on any other medium.
Right. So let's talk about that.
Like
So
they're the two medium-specific DV films.
Could the other films have been made on a format? Yeah,
But didn't Costa basically make Colossal Youth again, but not on DV for the rest of his career? After?
Pretty much.
But then the other Fountain House films aren't.
Yeah, they got a different vibe.
They got very different vibe. Yeah, they're not as. They don't have the same ineffable. They like to me.
Personally, I prefer Vitalina Varela, but yeah.
Well, to me, the other films all seem like art house. They seem like general art house fare, just more slow and with less of a plot.
They are better than that.
They are better than that, but in terms of their,
Vitalina Varela was the one I've seen.
Vitalina Varela is incredible, but it's like it. I feel like there's something about the aesthetic of Colossal Youth, which is so arresting, because of its because of its austerity, right? Or because of its austereness.
Yeah,
I guess austerity is
but I
don't mean austerity in terms of paucity. I mean this kind of austere.
There is something about Colossal Youth where you're in a tawdry bedroom and you don't realise the characters are there because they've not moved yet, and then they suddenly move. There's a great scene towards the end of the film where he's meeting one of his so-called children, as he calls them. They're not really his children, they're just people he's befriended in the neighbourhood. And Ventura is actually on the bed the whole time, and because the camera is so murky, you can't really tell his age. It might look like a pile of coats. And then towards the end of the scene, the character has been ranting about her physical ailments for ages. And suddenly he moves, and you realise that Ventura is actually in the room with her, and he kind of like leans over and rolls over slightly. And it's these amazing moments where Costa embraces the visual ambiguity that is afforded by, if this was on film, you would have immediately known that there was another person because you would have seen their outline. He embraces the visual identification of another body, which is a really defamiliarizing thing to see in a film. Like to have watched a scene for 3 or 4 minutes and not realize that there's actually a human being laying in like a quarter of the film. It's like quite shocking in a way. It's really interesting because you actually feel kind of shocked. Like, how did I not recognize that was a human?
I think this realization for artists in this moment of the ability to use this new texture, this new technology of registering images to leave things out is huge and kind of and hasn't yet really been developed from that point. No. I've got 2 quotes here that weave these two things together. The first is David Lynch when he was interviewed about, which is actually, I find Lynch not that helpful in interviews in general, but on technology and on practicalities of his filmmaking, he's very forthcoming. But he talks about what camera he used and why he used it, and he says, "Some information is lost, and it made me feel like there was more room to dream," which is a beautifully Lynchian way of talking about the fact that the dynamic range on these cameras is just very limited, and the detail and the differentiation between different layers is lost. Speaking of Costa and bringing us on to, I guess, the next section of our discussion, I'll bring in a very production level comment that Costa made when he was being asked about one of his more recent films, Horse Money, but he was looking back at Colossal Youth and his decisions to shoot on 35 and digital at various points. He says, "I remember at the time all of us thought, here comes a sort of democracy. Here comes small, cheap equipment. Young guys can buy it and can do cheaper films alone with friends. It doesn't exist anymore. Cameras are much bigger now. The main Alexa is bigger than the 35mm camera I used to work with. digital shooting today, you need maybe more people than you used to in 35, than you used to need in 35. It's ridiculous. It's how the capitalistic system grabs you again by the back. And I thought this was quite a good segue to talk about yeast and to talk about
Mary Bronstein, actually.
And to talk about possibly Miike Figgis, possibly Joanna Hogg as well.
Shit, we're not talking about that.
I feel like
talk about this.
Can I just say one thing about unrelated? I don't think Unrelated is I think it's a great film. I don't think it's particularly interesting that it was on DV.
No,
personally.
It is wrong.
Okay.
So Joanna Hogg's Unrelated, if you haven't seen it, is basically a film shot in Tuscany concerning a bourgeois family with a slight moment of social impropriety that arises, basically, that leads this family to sort of reject a outside agent, like a visitor. One of the things I think I think it does use DV in an interesting way, because I was thinking about it. One of the things it does is it de-romanticizes the Tuscan landscape.
Because of the flat color and
because of the flat color, it's a choice not to make the Tuscan landscape the main character in the film. There is also an element in which like a lot of the shots are overexposed, particularly exteriors are overexposed.
But is that in?
No, because it creates an effect. It creates an effect of like dissonance between this supposedly very lovely Tuscan holiday and the people who are on it, and it makes you realize how boorish.
I like her films a lot. I like that.
Daniel, you're basically saying it would have been shot on a more expensive camera.
Yeah, I mean,
it would have lost.
So what was Archipelago?
That was shot on Alexa.
Was it shot on Alexa?
Yeah, shot on Alexa.
Yeah, and
I think basically the now equivalent of film.
It looks like film, right?
Whereas I think,
but I feel like she wanted to shoot. I think Unrelated was shot on DV out of necessity.
But she wielded it in a way that feels. But to me feels like she was. Yeah, there was a way in which the film could have been shot on film or digital that could have really celebrated the landscapes. It feels like she is deflating the Tuscan countryside in such a beautiful way, because it feels deflating, because it feels tawdry, because you realise the family, this bourgeois family you're holidaying with effectively on this film, are really boorish. And
it may be that it's just accidentally really good on DV in a way that she didn't necessarily anticipate.
It could be that.
Because her latest Souvenir films are shot in an extreme. I think they are shot
extremely filmic way.
And they're just there's more movement and stuff. But she did carry over this stillness into Archipelago, where she could have probably done lots of different camera work in Archipelago if she wanted to. So there is a stylistic thing that she embraced. Although she said it was because she couldn't move the camera around.
But you mentioned a couple other references.
Yeah, because I wanted to talk, building on when we're all filmmakers here, and building on this Costa comment.
Costa.
Pedro says this thing about how it's now basically the same as there was this moment where a revolution where anyone could shoot anything and it was really cheap, and now to shoot anything and get any respect in the industry, you have to shoot on a particular kind of camera which costs thousands of pounds and requires loads of people.
Having said that, though, like what about like Tangerine? What about these films shot on iPhones?
There are exceptions, but the argument I would make is that given the extraordinary level of possibility that digital created, there are vanishingly few examples. I think, really. I mean, there's Tiny Furniture, Lena Dunham, which helped her make Girls.
Well, there's
also I feel like it's because
there aren't really that many iPhone films.
There's not, and also it's something to do with the fact that like there's not like you can shoot a film on a SLR and it's gonna look like quality. It looks. It doesn't have idiosyncratic.
Sure, but there's still when we talk about DV, we're talking both about a texture and a quality, but we're also talking about an ease, the surreptitiousness, the surveillance.
Maybe it's like too easy now, right?
And so why has that stopped there from being a revolution in filmmaking?
I think it's I feel like it's not so much captured by capitalist interests.
Right.
I feel like it's just that people feel when they make a feature, Well, maybe to the
Because there are
extent that
probably more people making features than ever before, but just there's not a.
But everyone wants to use a DOP and have a big camera when they
but
make
in terms
a
of
feature.
us actually seeing stuff, there isn't. I mean, Daniel, you said this thing the other day to me where you said it's strange that in the digital era, it's harder than ever to finish me off here, but it's harder than ever. It's harder than ever to get a film shown, and it's harder than ever in a mainstream cinema.
Oh yeah, I was but I mean that's
and yet it's easier than ever to.
It's easier than ever
technically
to. You could make if you wanted to, you can make a feature, right? Right now with the DSLR and a boom, and it would look and sound quite professional. But it's distribution, right? Even though now, like, these distributors are so hungry for content, they're still really risk averse. That's what's so strange. Like when film cost money, you could get in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you could get quite weird shit greenlit by big studios, and it would be so. Film cost money. There was a limited amount of places to show it. They were called cinemas, you know, and
there's something else working out here though, which is a fear of amateurism. And I think something we had particularly in the 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe in film, like Mary Bronstein kind of carries
that's 2000s, right?
2000, 90s, 2000s is something about amateurism in film. One thing you lose with the modality of filmmaking we have now is like no one uses like smash zooms, no one uses wild pans, handheld pans, all these things that are considered to be kind of amateurish now.
Well, I mean, Mumblecore was the last gasp of
even Mumblecore felt kind of mannerish in a way. And I think what you had with, like, say, Cassavetes, Cassavetes is a great one of like having a really amateurish sound mix where characters are constantly talking over each other, like Mabel, how are you doing? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, so there is a sense of the amateurism that was afforded by earlier modes of filmmaking, and there are certain stylistic tics consistent with that. Like I said, like a smash zoom or a kind of crash pan or any kind of weird tracking shot that doesn't entirely beautifully reflect the characters that are moving across the screen. Those things have been kind of rejected. And if you include those,
but I feel like shaky cam is now like a
shaky
like
cam
a very
is
prominent idiom.
Shaky
right?
cam is like the terrain of succession. It is not seen as...
it's never too shaky for comfort. You know, I guess that's the point. Whereas FESTEN is like aggressly shaky in a way that makes you think about child abuse.
Yeah, FESTEN is a film that is constantly trembling. You know, I don't think like the handheld, the nature of kind of handheld film now is something that Succession does really well, or badly, is that now there is a mode of amateur filmmaking or amateurish filmmaking techniques. Like the crash zoom, like I said, which you just do not see anymore.
Crash zooms weren't amateurish though.
But they weren't.
Crash zooms is a weird example.
No,
Crash zooms was very fashionable in the 70s.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying they were not amateurish, but they are now perceived as being amateurish.
No, I think crash zooms are perceived as being kitsch. I think that's just a bad example you're choosing.
It's not a bad example.
No, because crash zooms are not associated with.
What about
like certain kinds of zooms that you get in Succession have become stylized?
What about a face zoom, like a slow face zoom or a pan? Like a handheld pan.
I think claustrophobic tracking close-ups would be a better example.
Yeah, okay, so fine. There are certain techniques that something like mini DV really enabled, which are not now immediately people think, oh, that's amateur filmmaking.
Yes,
they are not. They don't have the received language of prestige art house drama or art house HBO drama that is associated with. This is how you make a film look classy. And even when you look at someone like Fassbinder was so amateurish in his filmmaking in lots of ways because he did all these things. He'd be like, someone's walking over a bridge. Right, fucking smash zoom on that motherfucker walking over the bridge.
Yeah, but his films were very, I mean, he loved Cirque, and so all of his films were very carefully kind of
I feel like you're right in the sense that, but I don't think this is the same problem, but you're right in the sense that there was a visual lexis associated with art house cinema, which was had this aesthetic, right, of these claustrophobic close-ups, handheld camera, which was then supplanted by the current lingua franca of art house, which is the Tarkovsky heritage of
Really composed.
really like hyper composed.
Yeah.
Of which Ostland is probably the most prominent
Yeah, and these
expositor
people come
of,
across
right?
actually-
And he's become more and more accessible and tasteful, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Become very HBO.
That's what I mean. But more and more he's lost. Same thing happened to the trajectory of what's he called? Dogtooth.
Oh yeah, Lanthimos.
Lanthimos, yeah.
Lanthimos.
Yeah. So Lanthimos' early
starts off
films
very restrained.
starts off just this very restrained, austere long takes.
Kinetta, for example.
And then in later films still has this aesthetic, but becomes much more accessible, right?
Rich.
Yeah.
They become
More
rich.
Wes Anderson-ish, yeah.
They become very rich. These directors. They go, okay, what depth and
They become very like financially rich by making these shit accessible films, right?
But does anyone not? I mean, the thing about these DV films is that no one really makes us successful. I mean, actually, Mary Bronstein never made another film, but no one ever makes ever makes a successful like DV masterpiece.
Well, look at
then doesn't go on to just shoot
look at
stuff.
Vinterberg now. Like, look at him making Druk or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Vinterberg stopped being aesthetically interesting, but I don't know how. Yeah. I don't know.
But all the filmmakers who made great DV films then went on to just make
Apart from
conventional
Lynch.
stuff.
Well, not Korine either.
No,
right,
Korine or Lynch,
Korine's last two films, Spring Breakers and The Beach Bum, they're still very aesthetically interesting.
Korine
I thought The Beach Bum was a bad film, but
I love Spring Breakers, but it isn't shot on DV.
Spring Breakers.
No, but his first films weren't shot on DV. He only used DV once, right? Gummo was not shot on DV.
No, but also a film like Spring Breakers could not have been shot on DV because it needed the kind of rich kind of like what would you call it, like a music video?
Yeah, it needs to be in HD.
And he knows how to manage an aesthetic for sure, and that's
100%. But whereas you might say Lynch was maybe the only person that really used and abused and took DV into his later filmmaking, because Lynch
he's made one film since, and it's a TV show.
Yeah, and he's always had an eye to the demotic, I suppose.
No, but I don't know if you can say that Lynch took DV and incorporated it. He hasn't made a film since.
Well, he's made TV series.
There are some shots in The Return.
There's something about The Return which is like
it's most aesthetically like Mulholland Drive.
Because what I'm saying is there's something immensely demotic about the way he makes films, which is like he always shoots like he's shooting a QVC bit of QVC footage. You know,
what's that got to do with
DV? Because DV is inherently demotic and it's inherently kind of like scrappy and it's inherently flat, which is something that a lot of The Return pursues. Like,
I don't think so at all.
Only a few. I think
not at all. I think The Return is sumptuously filmic.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Yes, it is.
When you've got Dougie getting a coffee in a kind of
that's
blank...
sumptuously filmic for sure. No, all the stuff with Carl McLachlan in it is very
it's
filmic.
incredibly sumptuously filmic.
No, it's not sumptuous.
It's a film it's a TV show that's dying to be shot on 35mm. What are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? It's nonsense. David Lynch incorporated DV into his film. Nonsense. He made one film on DV out of necessity, and by the way, Inland Empire really wants to be shot on film. Like, even though it makes a virtue of DV.
He has said that he loves digital now, and he will always work with digital, and he does on Twin Peaks.
Yeah, sure, but that's only because he's been fucked over by the studios and they won't give him any money. I can tell you, if the studios gave David Lynch loads of money and was like, here, make a 35mm film, we're a bottomless pit of money, he would do it 100%.
It's really odd that they haven't. But let's talk about yeast, for God's sake, because this was something of a discovery. There was an article by Richard Brody in the New Yorker, which celebrated this film 15 years after its release.
How have you got so pissed during the pod?
What, just because I said that
you drank? No, you're so drunk.
I'm not so
yes,
drunk.
You are. You're really drunk.
I'm really not.
You are.
Just because
You're all a bit drunk.
I'm sober as a judge. I've just had a few glasses of wine.
The difference here
but
is
this guy's had 5 pints, and it's kicking in now. Suddenly,
what I've said
it's suddenly kicking in now, halfway through the pod.
You said something you disagree with about David.
No, it's been a while.
What I said is basically.
What I said was.
What I said is David Lynch.
What I said is David Lynch.
He's trying to psych me out. I've said it's David Lynch with The Return was celebrating quite a QVC aesthetic with his filmmaking. With The Return, The Return is
I'm
not
not
a
sure
beautiful.
I'd say
I don't
QVC.
agree. And also QVC isn't shot on. It's shot on like broadcast video.
It's shot on mini DV. That's what we're saying.
Is it?
It's shot on mini TV style cameras. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's talk about yeast for Christ's sake.
But I don't think that QVC has the same aesthetic. I don't think that like
It's not a show.
video.
It's not an episode about.
No, but I don't think. I
Basically,
don't think. This is interesting though.
Daniel's about 4 minutes away from taking my fucking blood reading.
No.
My ABV.
I'm interesting. I think this is
You are
interesting because
you're a very interesting man.
I'm an interesting guy. No, I think it is interesting because I don't think there's an affinity between the flatness of TV
right.
and the flatness of cinematic mini DV.
Mhm.
Like
Right.
when I think of like EastEnders, I do think of this
Sure.
this flatness because it's shot on broadcast video,
Mhm.
right? But it's a different kind of. I mean, I don't actually know the technicalities here.
Yeah, it's shot on small sensor cameras, which
Yeah.
means that there's much more depth of field, much less. You can't
Yes.
really get those shallow shots.
It produces a very hyper real flat image.
Yeah.
yeah. And the color depth is the color science is very uncomplicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it looks
And
more
when
like
you-
camcorders. But this is I mean, if you ask people in that industry, they will say that it's getting closer and closer to cinematic. They're changing the sort of cameras they use.
Yeah, but but I mean, like generally, I haven't watched. I haven't seen what EastEnders looks like now, but I'm thinking of
It kind of looks kind of hyper real. It looks kind of a little bit too. When people talk about
They've
motion,
started using LED volumes.
motion
for
smoothing
Emmerdale.
now. Like,
But
when
what I
people
was
talk about
saying was,
motion smoothing
so
now,
if
that's
we
the
say like
effect
if we say something shot for TV
right,
in the 90s and 2000s,
Yeah.
contemporary to these films,
Yeah.
I don't think they're playing on that aesthetic.
no, they're not. I don't think.
No, they just are in that camera for practical reasons.
Yes, but they look very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a continuity of vision with those, with maybe anything shot on mini DV that happens to look like contemporary TV. And I think it's like when we talk about yeast looks like,
Which we haven't yet.
which you haven't yet. It looks like it has the look and feel of a kind of, I guess, MTV ad thing. There is a certain looseness and roughness of camera.
It looks like an MTV documentary rather than a studio.
It looks like Cribs or something, like an early Cribs.
I
Yeast
wouldn't say
does,
Cribs.
okay.
I'd say
No,
Yeast
no.
looks more like some documentary about kids.
So
on,
Yeast, can I just
looks
say,
like a Terry
Yeast
Richardson
is a Mumblecore era film directed by Mary Bronstein. It stars Mary Bronstein as a woman caught between two
Dynamic figures.
painful friendships with other women. And she goes on. She's meant to go on holiday with both of them. One of them protests and stays home. The other, played by Greta Gerwig, they go together.
Is this Greta Gerwig's first cinematic role?
No, she's been in there's quite a few films with Swanberg, and she was quite big on the Mumblecore scene
Mumblecore,
prior to
yeah.
this. Was kind of a late Mumblecore work. It was 2008.
Okay.
So yeah, and it's weird because I sort of gave up on watching Mumblecore films after I think Nights and Weekends by Joe Swanberg. I know there are good ones by what's his face,
Wojciechowski.
Podolsky.
They're all good.
Yeah, funny haha,
Support
it's
the
good.
Girls
But
is also great.
yes, but that's not
No
that's
longer
not
Mumblecore,
But,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of.
but interesting though that he went into Funny Haha was actually shot on film, but Swanberg obviously just churned them out on the DV, and they're just mostly films of people literally just mumbling about their feelings in a very boring way. But Mary Bronstein's Yeast is sort of careful.
What's that early Mumblecore film? Oh, what's it called? It's really bad. It's shot very clearly on DV.
Hannah Takes the Stairs. No.
No, not that one. I'll find out what it is.
Yeah.
The sound mix is so shit.
But anyway, Yeast is for me, it fulfills all the promises that I sort of hoped when I first heard what Mumblecore was.
Well, what are those promises for you?
That people could make something cinematically dynamic, psychologically interesting in the way that Cassavetes is interesting,
Yeah.
physically free, camera moving around, wandering like the eye does quickly and excitedly, and somehow drawing on sort of genuinely fraught, when you're in a room with people and you're acting, but you're kind of
there's
building
a
up
frenetic
tension.
energy.
Yeah, there's sort of Meisnerian kind of frenetic feeling that's built up between the actors very clearly.
I think
and
a
that's
film
harder
like
to achieve with film because you
I
have
think
to
a film
faff
like
around so much.
Yeast, the actual formal qualities of the film really don't. 'aid that. I think it's largely film aided by the kind of spontaneous, I guess, spontaneous, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I guess, the kind of, I don't know what the word is, but the kind of, I gu Quality of the acting. I think Greta Gerwig is very good because she plays a character who's deeply irritating, and I think to watch an irritant at work is always.
Yeah.
I don't think the camera really does or adds much.
Dance Party USA, that's the one.
Dance
No, I've
Party
never heard of it.
Awful film.
Awful
As you were, Owen.
As you were. So I feel like in that film, the film is really being carried by the acting presence of someone like Greta Gerwig. There is not.
And Braunstein and the other.
And Braunstein, yeah, they are good.
Braunstein, sorry.
But
Shout out to
Braunstein-
Alex Braunstein.
So what I'm saying is there is an element with these films where the acting charisma or persona of a character carries it. I don't think there's much to really elevate a film like Yeast to. I don't think the camera's really giving much.
The camera's doing loads. The camera's doing
It's
extraordinary amounts.
not.
I'm
It's not-
sorry
it's
for going
not-
up in here, but
not.
No.
the camera work in
there.
Yeast is phenomenal. It's
It's
extremely
really
dynamic.
I think it's incredible. I agree,
It's
but
really
I
not.
do think there's a distinction
Really
between
not.
there's a distinction between
They are lying.
camera work which has relative autonomy from the content, which is true of like very much of Colossal Youth and Julian Donkey Boy, and then
Where's my glass of wine? You've got my glass of wine.
Is that yours?
You've got one right there.
Oh, I poured into
Daniel
yours.
is
No, thank
drinking Ralph's glass of wine.
Um,
I don't really feel like the camera work is beyond being equivalent to the eye of the assumed spectator in a film like Yeast. It's not really doing
Which is a very noble cause for a camera,
no,
I feel.
no.
And the way it zooms in on people, and the edit. I mean, the editing is also hugely important.
The editing is good with Yeast. I think the great thing about Yeast is actually Greta Gerwig turning in a good performance for once in her career.
No, she's
I think she's a good actress.
She's
Extraordinary performance in
good
Yeast.
performances in other
Yeah,
films.
in plenty of films.
Yeah, she's,
No, I don't agree with that. But an extraordinary performance in Yeast.
All of us looking forward to Barbie, of course.
She's not
No,
in
I
that,
actually am. I actually am looking forward to Barbie.
She's simply the auteur.
You know, we are reviewing Barbie on this podcast.
I feel like we probably should review more films that everyone talks about. But everyone has been saying to me that
We're not going to review Mario movie, which I'm seeing on
No,
Monday.
but people have been telling me to review Tar, which is
Tommy.
you haven't actually seen it, have you?
Tommy and Feather Me. We are going to review Barbie though.
When does it come out?
This month,
June?
I think.
Okay,
June.
so we agree to disagree about Yeast.
No, but we haven't
I
established
want to
anything
hear.
about
I want
Yeast.
to hear Daniel. So you said the camera is quite integral to Yeast. I want to know why.
Well, because it's like it couldn't be shot in any other way, could it?
Okay, that's not an answer.
Oh, I think the way, I mean, you were talking just earlier about sort of violent zooms or kind of it.
Yeah, but the camera's
fast
pretty
pans.
passive in.
It's not. It's like incredibly claustrophobic.
Is it?
Yeah, it's incredibly claustrophobic.
Well,
It's
the
like
Safdies turn up and they're like, "Oh, we're trying to make a bridge across the river."
yes, that happens in the film. That's something that
That's an
happens
event that
at one
happens.
point in the film. Yes,
And the camera's just
that does
sitting there.
happen.
The camera's just
in
sitting
the
there.
film. Yes,
Yeah, the camera's just
at
sitting
one
there
point.
like a fucking lump. The
The
camera's just
Safdie brothers do turn up at one point.
It's not sitting there like a lump.
It's sitting there like a lump.
It's consistently dynamic.
It's consistently dynamic when the Safdie brothers
doesn't
are
stop
doing it.
moving, and
It stops moving loads of times. The camera's pretty much static during the entire
sorry,
15-minute sequence. Come on.
I'm sorry, this is horrendous fake news, which must be corrected. And if only my internet was a bit faster, we could get straight into
Ralph's
the...
trying to correct the account. I'm happy to be proved wrong. I don't remember being blown away by the camera work.
Well,
you're not blown away. It just like anchors the whole film. Look,
I just remember I forgot my bag, so I'm gonna be right back.
look.
This is going to be completely unhelpful to the average listener.
Okay, well we are watching a series of shots which
series
are
of
constantly moving and constantly claustrophobic
Whoa.
on the central character.
Sorry, I think the camera's panning around in quite a... It's just, yeah.
It's like
in a
the
way that's
eye.
very interesting.
It's like the human eye, ladies and
I don't
gentlemen.
know, beans.
But it's not
hot
still
dogs.
as you
Not
alluded
still
to.
at all. Look,
It's zooming out, it's zooming out.
zooming in.
out,
Oh my
out.
god!
Yeah.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, please understand the camera's moving.
But it is a kind of it's a kind of camera movement which has now become neutered in the aesthetic of
Yeah, exactly.
Succession.
Are you saying that
Because it's being made comfortable.
Yeast
Yeah.
anticipated these camera movements?
No, I think Cassavetes made camera movements like that in Shadows
No,
and necessarily
Cassavetes,
and Godard. Every time that there's been like a way in which cameras have been easier to use,
What Cassavetes
there's been
did,
more dynamic camera movement.
what Cassavetes did was anticipate the like Altman did, or how Hartley was the overlapping audio mix.
What's that got to do with the camera?
He's definitely done stuff with audio, but what I'm saying is
but
every
listen to me.
time,
What has that got to do?
It's got nothing.
every time the camera.
but what I'm
just saying there's a technical thing. Every time cameras have got lighter and easier to move around, there have been movements around the world, including Italian neorealism and French New Wave, and then later on Cassavetes, and then later on Mumblecore. Moments where people have enjoyed the freedoms of this light camera,
but what I'm
and that
saying
has
is-
led to more interesting artistic expression.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like what goes hand in heart with these things is the ability to have overlapping audio. And I think that's one of the
Hand
things
in heart.
Hand in heart.
What goes hand in heart with these things?
Hand in heart with these things is an overlapping audio.
I'm holding my hand.
I'll hold your hand. Is an overlapping audio, and it's the ability to have kind of a dynamic, complex audio mix with a dynamic camera. That is,
we haven't really talked about audio, but it's very true.
But audio is the main thing about
and you
this.
have more
like,
control over audio with,
you know,
with digital. But yeah,
this is one of the main standouts of this thing. It's like, you know, particularly a film like Yeast, which we're looking at now. One of the great things is overlapping audio. It's like characters, you know, lines overlapping with the next speaker.
I don't feel that's a major thing in Yeast.
It feels like it's me. Like it feels like a very. Yeast is really a conversation. Yeast is a like this flowing, overspilling, angry, inarticulated conversation. That's one of the great things about this film. Like one of the things I really enjoyed about it is that it is like it's pretty much like a buzzing in your ear. This film. That's how it struck me. It struck me as an audio work rather than a video work. It didn't. Nothing about the work like the film.
I don't think that's. Does that hold up? Does that claim hold?
I'm very passionate defender of the visual.
In many ways, Yeast is an audio work.
It is.
In many ways, you might say that Yeast is an audio work.
It's being released as a podcast.
Yeast is basically a Radio 4 afternoon play.
I mean, I'd be up for listening to
but what I'm
it,
saying is there is an element we haven't considered here, which is like the effects that we afford mini DV from a visual perspective, which is a kind of chaotic, moving, dynamic camera.
I'll tell you what is prominent in audio work. Timecode.
We haven't talked about Timecode, have we?
I think Timecode is so sort of strangely alienating and disorienting in terms of its 4-channel structure, not really allowing you to properly immerse in any of the 4 frames and kind of playing with the cleverness of the composition. That actually the most beautiful, and it is beautiful at times, thing about this collision is the polyphony that it creates through the soundtrack and the way that it moves between and then sometimes collides.
Yeah, there is a kind of Bactinian
I think that's true,
polyphony with it. I think one of the great things actually is not so much polyphony is the moments of like congruence with timecode, because it's like one of the great things about it is like how well timed it is. Like when it's not necessarily a dissonance of voices.
Scarily well timed.
It's like
earthquakes and stuff.
A series of earthquakes are used to, I suppose, kind of mark significant moments in the film, and there are moments where at the same time everyone will kind of like shudder and fall to the floor because they're experiencing an earthquake at the same time. I do not know how Mark Figgis kind of blocked or produced that. I'm not entirely sure.
Maybe what texts at the same time.
I mean, I don't know how, if they've got a page at the same time. Do you remember pages?
Could be.
But there is something about Timecode, which is a film we've not really talked about, which I suppose took... I don't know how it lines up with the thing like 24, which was televisually interesting at the time, because it used windowed narratives, but obviously that was edited post facto. This is a film where you've got 4 films that unfold at exactly the same rhythm. There's something very interesting about that, and I don't think anyone really explored the possibilities of DV in that way, because you could never shoot a film like that.
Yeah.
Because it would have been too costly. It was almost like Mark Figgis going.
It wouldn't have been too costly. I mean, people have made very ambitious things like that, but I just think it was a function maybe of the surveillance thing, because that was the thing you started to see was like multiple digital streams at the same time. But also, a function of digital life, being able to coordinate these sort of things, and also the camera being small enough that you could shoot the shot from the same, because most film shoots are a single camera operation where you do coverage and you move back and forth. But Timecode, often the same scene is being filmed from several different angles, and you don't see the camera on the other side.
Some of the best moments about Timecode are where you get 2 cameras slowly blending together.
Blending into the same scene and then moving out. I think
it's
nice.
strong. It reaches a sublimity at that point where you see 2 cameras depicting the same moment from slightly different angles, and they slowly merge.
Mhm.
And that is a phenomenal work of blocking.
It's
From a
impressive.
directorial perspective, there is something very beautiful about that. I think Timecode is like one of the I don't know. It feels like one of the DV films that embrace DV at its most kind of technocratic.
Yes, that's
Yes.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's
It
That
also refers to TV. There's
that
also-
just turned me off though, because it's too gimmicky.
it's very.
There's also a
key.
moment where a character says, "Digital video has arrived and is demanding new expressions, new sensations," and she holds up like a DV cam and to this like
Who is that?
to this Hollywood. She's called she's played by she's called Anna Paulis or something.
Oh, it's like a minor character.
She's a character. Yeah, she's presenting to this room of moguls and execs, telling them that they should all cotton on to this brand new thing, DV. And it is-
Self-referential.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
self-referential, but also
Yes,
also
meta,
Meta, you might say.
betokens this tragic, as I said at the beginning, a moment of a failed revolution, an unrealized revolution, because here we are. Netflix has a list of approved cameras. Most films that are seen in cinemas,
Does it actually?
Yeah, it does, and most of them are very expensive. Most films that are shown in a major cinema are made by the same four studios and are sequels and remakes and biographies.
But
and things like
Netflix
that.
also doesn't like buy shows as much. It mainly produces shows, right? I think the shows
It
it buys
acquires.
it acquires. I feel like it acquires foreign work,
South Korean work, particularly.
yeah. But I feel like
Right, Netflix is international, and in other territories you get different things.
Well, I don't know, but I feel like most of the Netflix shows are made by Netflix.
Sure, but there are loads of feature films.
I don't
on
think
Netflix.
they're made by. I think they
There-
are.
There's like this like shitty Polish film that me and Owen saw at the Kinoteca the other week is now on Netflix.
I think they buy
And in that sense, like a condition of their acquisition is it was shot on this camera.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's like 90% of the shots in the film have to have been shot in a list of cameras. Yeah,
Because it
Wow, that's
establishes a big
fucked up.
the cheapest of the cameras is $2,000.
And that's why Netflix has this shitty fucking visual homogeneity and all
it
its
has that
fucking
very
stuff.
flat grey. It has this a great greyshness about it, I think, which is like, everything is very dark, and that's one thing I've noticed projectionists complain about on Twitter, particularly going, if they screen a film that has been like a film that has been shown as cinema, they complain about the insane darkness of it. It's really hard to actually project these films because they're shot in this murky darkness. And they said it's not an aesthetic decision, it just, like, in an interesting way, it's just that just seems to be the mode, and it seems to look particularly good on a 4K TV
On a
and,
monitor.
Yeah, on an
Yeah.
OLED display, a dark
Amazing.
scene can be amazing, but in a cinema, it often makes the projection look quite bad.
Yeah, quite murky.
So do we? This is it's almost like I'm rounding off some leftist thing, but do we have hope for the future?
No,
of,
chapter 5, I don't.
of independent filmmaking? It's as you said earlier, it's never been easier to pick a camera and make a film, and it's never been easier to post a film onto a platform where almost anyone could see it.
OnlyFans.
And yet, somehow the big companies.
But I feel like
I still have a monopoly over
I feel
the
like
system.
the ease has led paradoxically to more of a lust for gatekeeping,
Yeah,
right? Because how would you?
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, anyone could put a feature on YouTube.
But that's sort of like
yeah.
a terrible idea
Yeah.
because it's just
No
in the
one,
ocean.
no one will take it seriously
Yeah.
either.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think.
Do I have hope though? I mean,
Yeah.
people are still
Yeah,
gonna
I hope
people
so.
are still gonna fucking make films, aren't they? People will still make good films.
Yeah, but there are good eras and bad eras, not there?
Yeah, but people will always make interesting films.
They will. I think that the technology like DV has a lot of affordances. Like, it is light, it is mobile, it's in theory quite cheap. It has an interesting, unique visual aesthetic. I think there's a.
But it's interesting because it is dead now, right?
Yeah,
right.
as well.
DV is dead, as in you
Will it become the Bolex?
you
Will
co-
it be like someone going, "Oh, I shot like some film"?
maybe. I mean, I feel like
There isn't
I feel
really a reason to buy a mini DV camera and
you
make
can't
a film.
you can't buy mini DV tape anymore. Like it has you have to buy it. They don't make it anymore.
Yeah, you can buy it on.
You buy
eBay.
it not on eBay, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but like it's much easier to buy VHSs than it is to buy
Yeah,
mini
because
DV
now you're
tape.
having to digitize in an interesting way, and I don't know if it will become like the kind of material aestheticization or fetishization that people see with Bolex or shooting on 16mm or 18mm.
Well, I feel like VHS has already become that kind of.
yeah,
Like there was that film last year. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a film shot on camcorder. What was that called? It was about the art world, I think. It was.
Was it a Renzo Martins thing?
No, it wasn't a Renzo Martins film. It was a narrative film. Okay. I didn't see it, but it was shot on VHS, and it had a very VHS look.
Basically, the way to look at it is there's no reason to shoot in any, as it were, defunct format. People can bring interesting insight to a defunct format. I think there are ways to invigorate Bolex or 8mm. Like there always are, or someone to really, really invigorate 35mm. I think the same might be said for mini DV. Like
hopefully,
interesting things potentially be shot on mini DV. I just don't know if it's a format that was ever present enough in our. It is imprinted a visual language on my head of like the early 2000s. It's like when I think of like 9/11 and these kind of like significant cultural events, I think of an MTV aesthetic that is defined by what I like in a naive way would call VHS, but it's probably really mini DV. Like I think of a lot of films, and I think there is a lot of overlap. You watch films from the early 2000s; they were shot on film probably at great expense.
Yeah.
And you think, like, do you know what I watched? I watched fucking Charlie's Angels the other day. A film shot on fucking film. Beautiful
They were all shot on beautiful film.
Beautiful film.
Trip shot on film.
Yeah.
Really beautiful film. It's like a great expensive thing. It's actually a trashy as fuck film that was shot, and there are scenes in Charlie's Angels that use block kind of primary colours in such a beautiful way. I think this is actually really stunningly. This is like,
you sure it wasn't some like prestige art house DOP on it, like Sven Nikovic or something?
Usually it was.
It was Wim Wenders fucking DOP be like, I must have work. I must have work.
So we're saying that hopefully people recover DV film.
Or like some vinyl fetishist
like
thing.
That's too anachronistic.
No, I just hope that the freedom that things shake down, film. There will be a surge of filmmaking on the cheap, because it has to be on the cheap because there's very little money going around at the moment, at least in the UK. There will be a surge of films made with an immediacy with people around.
But who in this room is going to be making a film on DV cam soon?
I'm making a film on SLR.
Oh, he's making a film SLR,
starring yours truly.
We're going to be in it. We're going to be in it.
Stay tuned, listeners.
Me and Owen are planning a something that could be shot on DV.
It might well be shot on DV. I'm not sure yet.
It's somewhat inspired by yeast and other things. But anyway, thank you for listening.
We've got a yeast infection.
We've got a yeast infection.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We will be back. Me and Owen will be back to talk about the work of the great octogenarian Pole Jerzy Skolimowski.
Jerzy Skolimowski. Yes.
Primarily his early work, but we're going across.
We're going to be poles apart, but we're going to do it.
No, I think we'll meet up.
That's a pun.
Yeah.
Big bird.
So that will be the next episode. Very excited about that. And there's also a Skolimowski season at the BFI right now. Not to give them undue publicity, but you can gen up on your Skolimowski.
We will be taking 2% of all ticket sales
before you listen to our pod. Yeah. Thank you very much, Daniel, for joining us for the DV episode.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Always a pleasure. Never a chore.
Never a chore. It's always a chore.
And until next time, don't shiver.
What are we doing for my 10th appearance?
Your 10th?
Yeah. No, it's something more exciting.
Barbie.
I'd love to do.
Should we do Barbie? Let's do Barbie for my 10th one. Yeah. Let's do Barbie.